Welcome, foolish listeners, to this week's episode of Halloweekly. I'm your host, your human host. And this week, we interview director James Carter, director of Foolish Mortals, a documentary about the Haunted Mansion fans. And consider this dismaying observation. This podcast has no windows and no doors, which offers you this chilling challenge: to rate and review on iTunes.
So we're here with Foolish Mortals director James Carter. Welcome to Halloweekly. Tell the fans a little bit about Foolish Mortals.
Sure. So Foolish Mortals is a documentary that myself and my crew are currently working on, which it focuses on the fan culture surrounding Disney's Haunted Mansion.
Love it. So what made you decide that the Haunted Mansion was the ride at Disney? Like, what was it about the Haunted Mansion where you're like, that's the one, that's the ride that I'm driving with?
Okay, well, I would say for me personally, I think it all comes back to being exposed to just a lot of Disney stuff at an early age.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people, when they think about Disney, they think of princesses and happy and fun times. But what's been there the whole time since the very beginning is a very dark, creepy element of it. You know, even starting with Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, which is a really dark, creepy movie if you if you watch it.
Yeah.
And I had this book that my parents gave me when I was a kid. It was a read-along book. I think it was called A Haunted House or something, but it was what it actually was. It was based on the Disney short Lonesome Ghost with Mickey, Goofy, and Donald were ghost hunters.
Mm-hmm.
And I still have this. I actually still own it because it's one of the earliest books I remember having, and I was obsessed with it. And I think that kind of introduced this dark, spooky stuff to me that by the time I got to go to Disneyland and ride Haunted Mansion for the first time, it just seemed like it just fit like a glove. It wasn't.
Do you remember like the first time like waiting in line and then getting on the ride?
Definitely, because I was kind of old. I was like 10 years old. I mean, old. A lot of people when they're doing it when they're 4 or 5 or something.
Yeah.
But I mean, I was old enough to remember, is what I'm saying. And I had no context of what we were going on.
Mm-hmm.
I was with my parents. We were just at Disneyland going on rides. I had no idea. I mean, it's called the Haunted Mansion, so I assumed there'd be something spooky in there, but that was really about it. And so I had, when we first went in the stretching room, I was like, what is happening? And I remember like, this chamber has no windows and no doors. I remember thinking, I was like, oh my God, right, how are we going to get out of here? And then when we get off the stretching room, we start walking down the porch by the portrait gallery. I was like, where are we going? I'm like, what kind of ride is this? Because every single ride at Disneyland, you get in line, there's the ride wheel, you sit in it and you go on the ride. Mm-hmm. It's usually pretty short, most of the ride on top of it,
Mm-hmm.
And I remember making that right turn and just seeing all the doom buggies in the background and my mind just being blown. I was like, what? And I had no frame of reference for what I was experiencing whatsoever, like no context, and I went into a pure, and I'm sure that's why it left such an impression on me.
It's funny you mentioned that because when I grew up in Ohio, and we had Kings Island at the time. That was our big thing, and growing up, they had a ride which I had no idea what the Haunted Mansion was, but they had what was called the Phantom Theater.
Actually, I gotta cut you off there because I do know all about that attraction.
It's growing up. That was my Haunted Mansion.
Yeah, it was like a ripoff of the Haunted Mansion.
Exactly, and so when we the first time I went on Haunted Mansion was geez, not that long ago, maybe 4 or 5 years ago. It was, I had this, it's funny, I had the same experience you had when you were 10. I'm like, no windows, no doors. Shit! How are we going to get out of here? how are we gonna get out of here? And it wasn't even until probably the, I don't know, fourth or fifth time I didn't realize the person hanging in the stretching room. And
Oh,
when I saw that, I was, 20, 23, 20, 22, 23, 24 years old. I got chills. I was like, there's someone hanging in the room. what?
I noticed that first time. He said, "There's always my way." No, I noticed him hanging the first time.
What I noticed, when I was watching the video on the crowdfunding page, that you have a team doing 3D renders of the Haunted Mansion. Could you go into that a little bit? Like, how did that start, and how's it all coming along in the documentary?
Sure. So I will say that, like you said, there's a team doing it. I'm not part of that team. That is not my area of expertise whatsoever. If the executive producer, Ryan Grulick, were here, he'd be able to kind of speak more to that because he's actually leading that team.
Gotcha.
But the idea behind it is we're not shooting any of the film inside the theme parks or on any Disney property.
Mm-hmm.
So we wanted to do a recreation of the mansion to interject throughout the film. So that was the idea. And what these guys are doing are absolutely amazing. They're basically recreating the Haunted Mansion from scratch in a 3D environment. Every nook and cranny. And then once they complete that, from my understanding, is that we can program it to do any type of camera movement and go anywhere. We can go from up above, we can go like that. We can just navigate all around there. So, me personally, I'm excited to see that as everyone else, because I have absolutely nothing to do with it.
I know. I saw it and I was like, you could just look at it, because that's what's great about it is, like, when you get stuck in the ride and they're like someone on. Anytime you get stuck, you're like, yes, I can soak all this in. So when I saw that you guys were doing the 3D renders, I was like, you can have that whenever you want. You could just stop in the dining hall. You could stop in the in the attic.
And me as the director, I actually literally get to say, I wanted to do this, this, and this. So I'm in the best position at all, because I get to say, I want this shot. It's like we actually have access to the mansion.
So your team, aside from, like, I saw like they were doing like the models of like the buildings, are you guys adding assets of like for example, like the knight that leans forward?
Oh yeah, it's all interior. We're gonna go into they but I'm not doing anything, like I said. But yeah, I'm gonna be able to go into every room, and they recreated this stuff from scratch. So I mean, it's not exact, because it's it's still an artistic process. They're not copying exactly like from photo references, but it's going to be reminiscent enough.
Any Haunted Mansion fan's gonna love it. I just the snippets you had in that video got me geeked. I was like, oh shit.
That was pretty early on in our process, like almost a year ago. So we're a lot further along now. So if you like that, you'll like what we got coming.
Gotcha. So in the documentary, it says you've interviewed people from all across, pretty much all across the states, all these Haunted Mansion fans. And I was wondering, do you ever notice like a slight rivalry between, like, because I'm in Southern California too, and I like the original Haunted Mansion's like my boy. Do you ever notice like a slight rivalry between, like, oh wait, we like this architecture in the Disney World versus this one? Or
funny enough, not really. I mean, just amongst Disney fans in general, people say their home park is better for X, Y, and Z, or the park they went to first. I've lived on the West Coast and the East Coast, so I grew up in Southern California. Then I lived in New Jersey for many years, so I'd go to Florida, pretty often. So I don't particularly have an allegiance to what I lean more towards Disneyland just for personal reasons. But as far as the mansions go, what I find is that most of the people that we interview have not gone to the other parks.
Gotcha.
Like, because we went to Florida and interviewed a bunch of people there, and when that question was brought up, they, I was like, oh, I'd like to go there someday, So, and for me though, it's funny because on paper, Walt Disney World's Haunted Mansion seems like it's better. It's got more things. It actually looks like a haunted place on the outside, but I think for me, I still stick with Disneyland's because of. It was the first one I went into, and it seems more intimate, even though it's pretty much the same. There's just there's like something in the air, something haunted maybe.
A little bit of character.
Gotcha. So the fandom, the fans who fuel the documentary, without giving too much away because the documentary's coming out. What's some of the craziest like fandom you've seen behind the Haunted Mansion? Like people who just go like absolutely nuts for it, live it and breathe it.
Well, it's funny because that's subjective. What's crazy, right? Because I mean, it's not really crazy to me, right?
Well, yeah, crazy in the sense where people who passionate. Well, exchange crazy for passionate.
I got it. I don't understand. I just want to that. Yeah, the focus in this film isn't like, look how weird and crazy these people are, because I'm one of those people. But I would say, I mean, we talked to a lot of people, right? But people, and a lot of people. I went to a lot of people's homes. Not everyone was in someone's home, but I went to a lot of people's homes and experienced, them in their element. Two of those experiences left a huge impression on me was I went to this woman named Shandy Snyder's house, and she has this room right when you walk in her house that, like, it is literally like you walked into the Haunted Mansion. Out of any place that I've been in my entire journey of making this, she basically, just to give you a clue, she wanted to make this room in her house so much like the Haunted Mansion that she joined like classes and local organizations for like people that do like home haunts, stuff like that, and learned how to build props. This is all like for hobby. It's like this, like that's how passionate she wanted. She wanted full size stretching room portraits. So she didn't even know how to paint. She took painting classes and drawing. Like, this is like, she was so passionate about recreating the Haunted Mansion in her house, and just, she has this thing set up on her windows that looks like lightning is flashing outside.
No way.
Like, I was just like, this is absolutely incredible, this house. So that was one that left an impression. Another one was interviewed, this guy's name is David Spencer. He had the largest amount of merchandise of Haunted Mansion that I've ever seen in my life. Like, he could open it as a museum and charge money. Like, almost his entire house, just everywhere you look. It's one of those things your eyes don't even know where to focus. I was just like, I can't believe that there's this much Haunted Mansion art, merchandise, statues, actual costumes. That
Heaven on Earth, I think, is what the place is called.
Yeah, it was insane. So those are two things that kind of left an impression on me, that as being kind of like maybe most passionate, kind of over the top, because I was like, wow.
Directing the film, do you collect a lot of Haunted Mansion memorabilia, artwork, mugs, any of that kind of stuff yourself?
Me, no. I mean, I have some things. I'm not really like a big merch like guy, I guess. I mean, I have some things, of course, but nothing that would like. If I wasn't making this documentary, I don't think that I would aspire to be in it. Like, I mean, I probably have some things to say, but not like because of my stuff or my house or like that, So I'm not like I'm just not like a huge collector things in general. I mean, I collect records, so I have the Haunted Mansion record from the 60s, the read-along book. And there's also this record that Disney put out before the Haunted Mansion opened. It was like thrilling and chilling sounds of the haunted house, which was kind of a precursor to things that ended in the Haunted Mansion. So, I guess that's kind of stuff that I have, stuff like that.
So when did you actually start production of the documentary?
We started in July of 2016. And, it hasn't been like nonstop shooting. We've pretty much been doing it in blocks based on, funding and day jobs and all that kind of stuff. And we're almost done shooting. I have a handful of interviews left to do. I went to New York and New Jersey, shot some stuff there, went to Seattle area. Then after that, we were in Orlando. And after we got back from Orlando, which was in October, I've just been doing interviews in Southern California. So
So you started shooting then. Did you? What was the deciding factor? Because you've always been a fan of the Mansion since you wrote it back when you were 10. What was the moment when you decided, okay, documentary is being made right now. We're starting. Let's do this. Do you remember like what the moment was?
Yeah, I mean, that moment was just about a year ago. 'Cause
Mhm.
I was trying to figure out when it was because I wanted to kind of mark the amazing journey that has gone on since I came up with the inspiration to do it. But so around now, I guess. But I mean, yeah, around this time of year. But yeah, so the idea really came from my podcast.
Mhm.
'Cause I host a podcast called Creepy Kingdom, which focuses on the creepy side of Disney.
Oh, that's cool.
Shocker, because the documentary is truly an extension of the podcast. It was stemmed from that. Obviously, we covered Haunted Mansion a lot on the show,
Mhm.
and I would have people on the show that were artists that created, Haunted Mansion inspired art, and then I'd have them on the show, and it'd be interesting to talk about, how I decided to do this. And some of these professional artists, some of them actually work for Disney,
Mhm.
and so that started get the gears turning, and then I would see the reactions to these episodes, and I just started digging deeper and deeper, and I realized that there's this deep passion amongst Haunted Mansion fans that, like, the deeper you go, the crazier, like, using your word, and passionate. I need some more adjectives. Whatever.
We all know what we mean.
Right. Need a thesaurus here, but anyways, I kind of wanted to explore it, and and other than that, I've been working in film and video production since the early 2000s, so I have a background in doing that. And it just kind of all came together. I was like, maybe I should do this as a documentary. And I'm like, oh, maybe. Okay. And I mentioned it to a few people, and they're like, yeah, sure. But I knew when I mentioned it I'm like, I'm going to announce I'm going to do this on the podcast. Then then I can't back out of it.
It's in concrete now. Yeah.
Yeah. And the decision to do that, it's just been off and running since then. Like, it's been a crazy ride ever since that episode went out when I announced that I wanted to do it. So that's pretty much where it all came from.
Have you noticed a consensus with the fans? Is there any sort of topic they hit on the Haunted Mansion that they all sort of jive with? Is there a centerpiece of the Haunted Mansion that you think brings the fans together, or do you just think it's the story and the idea of it as a whole?
Obviously, as we were making this documentary, we're searching for the common thread.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think it's really a spoiler that there isn't one. Like, it's, there's, some crossover, but there isn't like this thing that, like, oh, this is the thing that everyone gravitates to. That's so many people, they take different things, and different things resonate from the mansion with them, and it affects them in different ways. We've talked to so many different types of people, and no interview has been the same.
Oh, so cool.
And that's part of the fascinating thing about this that I wanted to explore. Like, it's like, what is it about this, this spooky house in Disneyland that just resonates with so many people? Like, it is fascinating. It still is fascinating to me.
Just curious. Have you tried to, like, interview? Because the Haunted Mansion seems to have, like, its core fans more so. Like, you don't see people running around talking about how great, like, Pirates is. Like, it's not like, I mean, there's a few.
There's a few, but that's the closest example that you have to what you're talking about. There definitely are people that are into Pirates in the Caribbean and collect all the stuff. But those two rides are kind of like brother and sister. They're because they're created, or whatever analogy you want to use. Like, their original concepts are not based on anything else when they opened. There was nothing like it in the world before people experienced it.
Mhm.
And they're still pretty much there, close to their original form, all these years later. and people are still flocking to experience it.
Mhm.
So they are related, but I mean, there's as far as a fandom around a Disney attraction, there's nothing comes close to the Haunted Mansion.
One thing that the Haunted Mansion does every year is they turning into the Nightmare Before Christmas ride. Do most fans do they get behind it? They're like, yeah, we love this thing every year, or do you have a few fans who are like, nah, keep it the way it is, don't?
The consensus on that is that it's totally split. It is a 50.
Really?
Yeah. Some
Wow.
people hate it. Some people love it. Very few are different though. But yeah.
Where do you stand on the Nightmare?
My personal stance, I mean, I kind of have mixed feelings about it.
Mm-hmm.
I think that it's incredibly well done. It's a lot of fun. It's when you go on the ride all the time as a local, it's cool to have, something, a little different for a little while.
Mm-hmm.
I guess some of the negative aspects of it are number one, I think that Nightmare for Christmas totally warrants its own attraction. It doesn't need to
Yeah.
be part of another one. And one of the things that's really, in my opinion, glaringly missing from Haunted Mansion Holiday is the music from Nightmare Before Christmas.
Yeah.
Yeah.
and that's a character amongst itself.
Mm-hmm.
Like with Nightmare for Christmas, so that's kind of a bummer. I'm sure there's some legal or royalties or some whatever issue that it doesn't happen. But probably the reason, and a lot of the complaints that I hear when I ask people about it, that I dislike about it the most is that it is not a Halloween overlay; it is a Christmas overlay.
Mm-hmm.
Because essentially they turned the Haunted Mansion into a Christmas thing. It's not like there's a little bit of Halloween in there, but it's Christmas, and it runs from the beginning of September to the middle of January. So essentially, it's a Christmas attraction for over 4 months. And and the worst part is you can't go experience the Haunted Mansion in Disneyland like during Halloween time and have either the original version, have it be what itself, like the scary, spooky one, or like we're sitting there celebrating Christmas. If it was like I'm not like against Christmas.
No.
Clearly, I'm more into Halloween than Christmas.
Yes.
And I assume you are by the title of your. So we can. Yeah, let's
tone it down. That I agree with you. Maybe just turn it down just a bit. Maybe 2 months, cut in half.
Yeah, I mean, logistically doesn't make sense, and I also know that the wait times for Haunted Mansion during Haunted Mansion Holiday are probably quadruple they are the rest of the year. So clearly it's a draw. But that kind of goes to my other theory that clearly Nightmare Before Christmas merits its own attraction because there's a demand for it, and quality-wise, there's so much you can do with it, and we want to see all these different things, but. So it's kind of mixed. And one of the interesting reactions that I interviewed someone, his name's Spooky Dan. He's a film director. His house and stuff in his house was pretty split amongst Nightmare Before Christmas and Haunted Mansion stuff. So he clearly loved both. And even in the background of the shot of interviewing him is the Nightmare Before Christmas characters in front of the Haunted Mansion. So it's an artwork. So clearly he has affinity for both. But he even said that clearly I love Nightmare Before Christmas, but I wish that they would just leave the Haunted Mansion the way it is. It's perfect the way it is, and I found that pretty interesting for somebody that even loves Nightmare Before Christmas.
even the fan, like the hardcore fans, are like, hey, come on.
I mean, most people don't dislike Nightmare Before Christmas. They like Haunted Mansion in general, but but there are some mansion purists.
Yeah. So the two main, or not main characters, but the two characters that I think get talked about quite a bit, other than the three hitchhiking ghosts, is the bride and the Hatbox Ghost, and I just wanted to ask about the fandom behind the Hatbox Ghost, because if my history is correct, he was only in the ride when it first opened for a few days. Is that right? Like if that, and then he disappeared for like 40 plus years. It came back. What was it about the Hatbox Ghost that you think kept him in the fandom for so long? I mean, the fans essentially kept him alive, kept the ghost alive, which is kind of funny.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that could be a documentary amongst itself, because my opinion, I guess, is what you're asking me. Well, a lot of people's introduction to Haunted Mansion, of not necessarily my generation, but maybe a little bit, the generation before me, was not actually going on the ride, but was receiving the Haunted Mansion record, the read-along record. And Hatbox Ghost is prominently featured in that, in the drawings, and he speaks in the story. So I think a lot of it comes from there. And I know amongst that, over the years, Disney has not done a lot of Haunted Mansion merchandise. As of the past few years, they've exploded with it. But over the history of the attraction, it's like barely been anything. But even when they did, some of the things, they would include the Hatbox Ghost. And that's kind of, especially as of maybe 10, 15 years ago. And that's because the people that are in charge of doing it and designing all this stuff is that they're old. Those are the people that are the old school Disneyland fans. Now they work some became Imagineers. And that's the other reason too, is that I saw a panel about the history of the Hatbox Ghost and it coming back, that was put on by the Imagineers that worked on the new Hatbox Ghost. And they were kind of, when it boils down to it, is like, they got to fulfill one of the biggest fan dreams, because they were fans, and all that. And so I'm glad that at least some fans are on the inside,
doing the Lord's work in there, getting the Hatbox Ghost back.
So. But yeah, I mean, that's part of the mystery of it, right? It's like, why so and so. There's clearly no one's obsessed with Hatbox Ghost because they saw it on the ride, because
you had to be there day one to catch it.
Maybe there's a few people that are like, that was awesome, but it clearly wasn't awesome because they took it out because it wasn't working.
The other thing I wanted to know is going around and interviewing the people who have this passion for the Haunted Mansion. You mentioned it, how it's influenced people's lives. How have you seen the mansion shape someone's career or their art or just anything in their lives?
Professionally, that's an easy one to track for a lot of them. I mean, so we interviewed Jason Sorrell. He's a former Imagineer, currently works for Universal Creative. That's people that design the Universal attractions. But he has been essentially, he's been responsible for some things that got into Florida's Haunted Mansion. And which is fascinating, because when I was interviewing him, I mean, he was obsessed with the Haunted Mansion since he was 4 years old. And then when he became older and got to, follow this career path and ended up working as an Imagineer, he got to enhance things that they're not in the Disneyland one, but they're in the Florida one. And I found that to be just incredible. I was like, you got to fulfill your dream and actually leave a legacy as part of the Haunted Mansion. Now, I'm being vague about it, so I'll tell you what he did. There's a headstone in the graveyard in Walt Disney World's Haunted Mansion of Madame Leota, and it's got her face, carved out of stone. And pretty much like every few minutes, the eyelids open, and they blink and then they close. It's a very subtle,
but just enough to get, if you catch it, you're like, whoa, what the hell was that?
Yeah. And that was there before, what you were talking about. They had that new queue line with the instruments and the statues. That stuff's pretty new. That stuff is less than 5 years old, but that was there earlier. And that was like the only kind of indication that something is kind of wrong here, besides the house looking a little spooky. So it was a very subtle thing. And also he was fascinated with the history, and he wanted there to be an official book about it. And then he's like, well, why don't I just write it? And then he even said when I was interviewing, it's like, he's not a writer. He worked he's working on building attractions.
Mm-hmm.
But he asked like someone that one of his supervisors, like, who do I talk to about writing a book? And they're like, oh, I'll send this, write up a book pitch and I'll give it to so and so. And he's like, a book pitch? He's like, go home, Google preparing a book pitch. Like, he had no idea. He put it together and they're like, sure, go for it.
They just gave him the green light.
And they gave the green light to do it. And now, not only that, it's the official Disney book. He had access to all the archives, all the amazing artwork. So it's the book Haunted Mansion, an Imagineering classic.
Yep.
That's his book.
Yep.
So that book is written by a fan. That's not like a corporate, BS book.
Being a huge fan of horror, the Haunted Mansion's obviously a no-brainer for a lot of horror fans. If you're into horror, the Haunted Mansion, you're going to love it on some level, if not fully. Have you met anyone who, say, isn't a fan of horror, but the Haunted Mansion maybe kickstarted a love for horror or gave him an introduction to spooky ghost stories or anything like that?
Interesting. Well, the first part I do want to say is that I did want to explore what the connection between the horror fan community and Haunted Mansion was, because there are tons of horror fans that love the Haunted Mansion that are not necessarily Disney fans.
Yes.
And, the conclusion I came to on that was, and which ties in the second part of what you're saying or asking, was that I think a lot of people's first exposure to anything dark and creepy is the Haunted Mansion. Amongst the fans, of course. Not everyone gets to go to a Disney park, but and it's, and not even that. I think their exposure to that was Disney. Disney is shoved down our throats as American children from the second we're born. And like I said it earlier, the creepy, dark element of Disney has always been there. That's our first exposure to horror. That's the whole, like, it's a theme or whatever of my podcast. Like, it's just kind of like
yeah,
it's like the creepy dark side of Disney is just as prevalent as the happy fun side. It's the yin and yang. Like, the one can't exist without the other.
Yeah.
You even get that in a lot of Disney films.
And the thing is that you're exposed to this stuff real young, because parents are just like, oh, it's fine,
It's Disney. There's nothing that's gonna fuck up a childhood there.
Because their parents did the same. I mean, Walt, he got the stronghold on family entertainment from the 50s on. I mean, so, but as times change and what's in children's entertainment shifts, it's definitely stuff that we watched when we were kids that would not really fly in films today. But I know that Disney still try to do it. Even their latest film, Moana, has some dark, creepy parts to it. So
yes, it does, yeah.
Glad that they're keeping the dream alive there. But introduction to horror. The other thing I wanted to say too is that clearly interview people that love dark, creepy stuff, but there are people that don't like that stuff at all. And then there are people that are like, they just like it just a little bit, and Haunted Mansion is just as extreme as they want to get. So it's all spectrums. One thing that Walt Disney had said, and something that Raleigh Crump brought up to me when I was interviewing him, was that it's that people like to be scared, so let's scare them. Because Snow White's Scary Adventures in Disneyland is an opening day attraction for 1955. And arguably, in my opinion, that is the scariest, creepiest, darkest ride in all of Disney, even way more than Haunted Mansion in my opinion. And and that's I love reading about Disneyland history. Love hearing like children would be like, oh, let's go on the Snow White ride, the 7 doors, happy good times, and they would just come off mortified. The ride is basically about the witch trying to kill you over and over again.
Even the queue for that ride's scary.
Well, they changed it. Originally, they changed that in 1983. Originally, it wasn't scary. They did that on purpose to give you, and then and it wasn't originally called Scary Adventures either. So they gave all these subtle things to kind of warn parents that this is going to be a
spooky ride.
You enter through through the Queen's dungeon now. That wasn't like that before.
Oh, gotcha.
I was gonna say, because even just across from Snow White or close to it is the Mr. Toad's Wild Ride.
Yeah, another opening day attraction. Yep.
And even what was Mr. Toad's the same as it was then, where it's like, hey, we're just gonna get this car, take a quick little road trip to hell, and hop out.
I think there's been minor enhancements. I think Mr. Toad's pretty much stayed the same. Besides, basically in 1983, all of Fantasyland got these whole new outdoor facades. Before they were just look like tents, like like carnival tents. That's what was there in 1955, and then in 1983 they gutted the entire outside of it and then rebuilt all the things that are standing there now to make them have their own little buildings and architecture.
When does Foolish Mortals release? Do you have a release date yet?
We do not have a release date, so we're currently still shooting, and then we're going to be full on in post-production mode. Our goal, which said we don't want to make any announcements till everything's concrete, of course.
Yeah.
But we hope to have our premiere screening in late spring of this year. We want to do a series of screenings in different cities, and from there we're still figuring out how the distribution is going to go. But
because you had a successful crowdfunding campaign, I just want to let the fans know, like, people fucking love this this idea.
Oh, I concur on that. The idea of this film is just exciting people so much. So we know we have to deliver on the actual film, but just the idea of the film, people are really excited because it's an untold story. Really, I mean, there's so much information out there about the history. Like I said, there's the books, there's websites and podcasts and all this stuff. But this is an untold story, and the people that are really interested about it, because it's their story. Like we're fans telling the story of the fans.
Yeah. And how did you decide? You just have so much footage and so much material, like, to craft a story from. But how do you decide, like, what parts of the fandom get put into the movie?
Well, we're kind of looking for recurring themes, because when you do a documentary, you don't really know what you're going to get until you get it, right? So
yeah,
you have to go through. You just look for recurring themes, and so try to tie it together with that. We're also following a story of a journey of an artist. His name is Topher Adam. He does incredible Haunted Mansion and Nightmare Before Christmas art, and he wants to be a Disney artist. And we're going to be following his journey to achieve that. So that's kind of like our main story arc of our film.
And where can the listeners find Foolish Mortals and follow you and stay up to date on all the news?
Sure. So we have our website, it's foolishmortalsdoc.com. And also right now, people are really clamoring to get, make sure they get their copy of our DVD when it is officially released. We do have DVD pre-orders for sale, which are on our website. And we just, as of a few days ago of this recording, just put out our T-shirts that are for sale right now too. And not that you asked that, but I gotta get that plug out there. So yeah, the T-shirts feature a subject of our film. Her name is Miss Mansion. She's also all over our social media and our avatars.
Love that graphic of the cemetery with the umbrella.
Yeah, that's Miss Mansion right there. Yeah, that's so she's one of the people we interviewed for the film, and she became kind of our official model, I guess, for all of our promotional material. So yeah, we have those there, and yeah, we're on every social media I can think of, but yeah, we're on Facebook, Foolish Mortals Doc, Twitter, Foolish Mortals D, because they wouldn't let you spell out Doc, and Instagram, Foolish Mortals Doc, and even on Tumblr, we're on Foolish Mortals Doc. So, and we're we're on there all the time, as you alluded. Little Nikki is just constantly posting stuff, and her and I are the ones responding. We usually try to identify who's speaking, so people so if we give us like a personal answer or something, but
Mhm.
And that's the thing about it. I mean, a lot of the stuff that's been on the account has actually had nothing to do with the film.
Mhm.
It's just kind of like we've kind of turned it into like a place to just express our love and for the attraction. By posting the construction stuff, or like, oh, we're on a Haunted Mansion again, and so I like to think our social media is becoming like a hub for Haunted Mansion fans, like that will grow even or live on even beyond the film. So,
Mhm.
And if anyone were to be making the documentary, I think we're all glad it's you guys, the people who are passionate passionate about it, man. And I was just thinking, like, someone who's a fan like yourself, going around interviewing all the people who love to collect all the stuff. They have to have foolish mortals to be the biggest fans to have it on the DVD shelf.
I never thought about that.
Because you can't have a Haunted Mansion documentary, be a fan, and not own it. So
yeah, we'll do a sequel where we'll go to everyone's house and show their DVDs.
Well, James, thank you so much for taking time out to talk about it. We're so looking forward to this, and I know it myself. I can't wait to watch it.
Thanks so much for having me on. I had fun chatting about all this stuff.